Good afternoon, I'm Brian Tremlett. SAC elections are in full swing.
And I'm John Platts. Two major changes in the NHL last night. I'll have the details after the news.
The race is on at Loyalist College to fill 5 positions for next year's Student Council. Sherry McCormick has more.
Elections are now underway for the new Students Administrative Council. Vice President David Hope tells us about some positions available.
On SAC, there's 5 positions available on the Executive Council, and of those 5 positions, 3 of them were acclaimed. The 5 positions are the President's position, the VP of Administration's position, VP of Internal Affairs, VP of Finance, and VP of Programming. The positions that people are running for is the President's position and the VP of Internal Affairs position. The other 3 were acclaimed, as mentioned earlier.
Where and what time can people vote today?
Voting is happening today and tomorrow between 11 and 2 o'clock up in the cafeteria.
This year, SAC is hoping for a successful turnout. Last year, only 11% of the student body voted. That's only 200 out of the 2,500 eligible to vote. This is Sherry McCormick reporting for CBLC News.
We have some updated news as of 12:20. There were 110 votes cast. You can still vote tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's back to the drawing board for British Columbia Premier Bill Vander Zalm and his fight against abortion. The court has struck down the government's policy of refusing to pay for abortion on demand. The BC Supreme Court ruled its government does not have the authority to limit funding for abortions to cases where a woman's life is threatened and cannot without medical services from a woman.
BC Civil Liberties President John Dixon emerged from the courthouse triumphant, armed with the Supreme Court ruling that strikes down the provincial government's orders in council that removed funding from non-life-threatening abortions.
The Chief Justice's comments in this matter are very strongly worded and unequivocal. The policy that is established by the regulation which we challenged is set aside as null and void.
Attorney General Brian Smith says he will recommend to Cabinet that the government not appeal.
I read the decision this way, as it not only says that to de-insure abortion from the Medical Services Act is flawed, it is a strong suggestion there that if we were to reenact it or to do it another way, that we would still fail under the Charter.
BC's opposition leader says the government must not only let the ruling stand, it must also consider it retroactive.
It goes right back to what the Supreme Court of Canada said about the constitutional right of women to security of person. And the government has behaved in a disgraceful and shameful manner. And I am so aggrieved about this because of the terrible, terrible imposition on poor women in this province.
Wendy Brecan, Global News, Victoria.
The pro-abortion movement is happy with the court decision. Mike Harcourt, leader of the BC New Democratic Party, wants Vander Zalm to obey the ruling and stop trying to impose his personal views to the public. Vander Zalm says he's not sure how he's going to continue his battle against abortion. However, he says he'll do it one way or another. The Panama turmoil has spilled overseas. Police in London, England are questioning 7 men about the crashing of that city's Panamanian consulate. Richard Blistone has more on this story.
The London embassy is headed by a friend of General Noriega. The consulate in this shabby building over a row of shops was under an ally of President Del Valle, who refused to leave. The raiders hit shortly after midnight. Witnesses said a Land Rover pulled up to the door, blinked its lights, alerting the security man, who fled upstairs and then rammed the door. Those who saw the early morning raid said 7 men in camouflage fatigues stormed the building and ejected the guard and 3 women and a male staff member who were camped there. Mrs. Mayra Paredes had stepped out and returned to find the invasion in progress.
Well, what would you do if you have a sledgehammer in front of you and a truncheon? Well, you stay there and fight?
Well, what happened?
It just gives you an idea. If they dare do this in front of the international community, what happens in our country, right?
Police arrived and the invaders, who changed out of their combat gear, were taken away. No one was reported injured. In the morning, Ambassador Guillermo Vega arrived to take possession, claiming he'd done nothing wrong.
Because this place was full of intruders, it did not belong to the Panama embassy.
Later came Consul General Eduardo Aranga. He said he'd removed all his official files days before, just in case.
If he comes out here, I'll speak to him, but I don't think he dares to come down.
When he got to the door, the consulate closed notice, signed by his ambassador, was already up. It was closed to him, too. With his only quarter of appeal, the British Foreign Office, the consul got in his car and left. But the Foreign Office, too, was in a dilemma. The rule book doesn't cover this kind of case. The affair has been an embarrassment to the British government, which up to now hasn't had to commit itself on Noriega. But now Noriega's man is inside. These are diplomatic premises, and it would seem for the moment there's not much the British government can do. Richard Blystone, CNN London.
A man wanted in Canada on charges stemming from the 1985 bomb blast in Tokyo's Narita airport has been remanded in custody in Britain until April 5th. But lawyers in London indicated today it may be 6 or 7 months before a hearing is held on Canada's attempt to extradite Inderaj Singh Rayat to face 8 charges in the bombing, which killed 2 baggage handlers. The one-time Canadian resident was arrested last month by British police, but the court was told today that the Canadian government has not pressed a formal extradition application. Under British law, Canada must do so by April 5th. The Narita blast occurred as baggage was being transferred to an Air India flight from a CP jet that had just arrived from Vancouver. Officials at the Come-By-Chance oil refinery in Newfoundland say the crew of a tanker accidentally caused the oil spill at the facility. About 500 barrels or 1,000 liters of oil leaked out yesterday when a crew failed to close a valve while the tanker was being loaded. A smaller spill from the same tanker occurred on Sunday. South of the border, it is Super Tuesday, the nation's biggest primary day ever. Advanced polls indicate that the Democrats Michael Dukakis and Jesse Jackson are expected to split the lion's share of the delegates. But Super Tuesday could produce a decisive victory for George Bush on the Republican side. Senator Albert Gore is expected to finish second in that race. A top AIDS expert is lashing out at the new Masters and Johnson book on AIDS. Dr. Jonathan Mann, head of the World Health Organization AIDS program, is upset over sweeping statements in the book. He questions claims that you can get AIDS from French kissing and insect bites. Mann told reporters that at an AIDS conference in London, there's no proof to back up his claims. And finally, Miss Teen Calgary. 15-year-old Dara Sutton is the new Miss Teen Canada. She was crowned last night in Toronto. Miss Kamloops, Sarah Strauss, was the first runner-up. There were 41 contestants from across Canada for the 20th annual pageant. Well, that's it for the news. John will be back right after this with the sports.
Family orchards take pride in growing the finest red, delicious apples. For the tastiest in homemade pies, Szabo Orchards also produce the best non-preservative cider in Prince Edward County, or applesauce, the smoothest you'll ever taste. For a quick snack, you can make them disappear, as easy as 1, 2, 3. Szabo's Family Orchard, Rednersville Road, Prince Edward County.
Food, water, food, water. Oh, I sure could go for a Mr. Zed Super Sub right now. No. Oh, what a nightmare. I gotta get to Mr. Zed's.
Mr. Zed's Submarines and Pizza, 324 Front Street, Belleville.
There were 2 major trades in the NHL last night. Edmonton Oilers unloaded reluctant goaltender Andy Mogg for another forward who can skate, score, and check. Jeff Courtnall from Boston. Also, the Flames got veteran defenseman Rob Ramich from St. Louis, but they paid a price. A couple of good young defensemen, Brett Hull and Steve Bozek. Rick Wamsley will just back up for Mike Vernon. There were 2 games last night in the NHL. The first saw Edmonton at Winnipeg. Come on, guys. The other game was Pittsburgh at Calgary, 5-4. Tonight's roundup has Boston at Detroit, Hartford takes on Quebec, New Jersey versus the New York Rangers, and Vancouver plays the New York Islanders. 3 rinks are still unbeaten heading into the 3rd day of the Canadian Men's Curling Championship. Alberta, Ontario, Saskatchewan all have 4-0 records in the Chicoutimi, Quebec competition. Ontario's Paul Savage kept his share of the lead last night with a 6-3 victory over Thomas Hackinson of Nova Scotia. Eugene Hertzke of Saskatchewan stayed unbeaten by stopping Dave McFadden of Prince Edward Island 11-6. Alberta's Pat Ryan had the evening bye. Al Hackner of Northern Ontario is right behind the leaders at 3-1, followed by Nova Scotia at 2-1. This morning's draw was Ontario playing Northern Ontario. There were 9 exhibition baseball games last night in Florida. Canadian teams were Toronto losing to Texas 6-3, Montreal over Baltimore 8-4. Other winners were Detroit, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Boston, Kansas, Pittsburgh, and New York. NBA action saw New York over Chicago 110-98. Los Angeles Lakers topped Philadelphia 110-104. Utah over New Jersey 105-81. And finally Sacramento over Denver 116-114. That's all for the sports. The weather looks like rain. Brian will have the details after this. The orchards take pride in growing the finest red, delicious apples. For the tastiest in homemade pies, Szabo Orchards also produce the best non-preservative cider in Prince Edward County, or applesauce, the smoothest you'll ever taste. For a quick snack, you can make them disappear as easy as 1, 2, 3. Szabo's Family Orchard, Rednersville Road, Prince Edward County.
Food, water, food, water. Oh, I sure could go for Mr. Zed Super Sub right now. No. Oh, what a nightmare. I gotta get to Mr. Zed's.
Mr. Zed's Submarines and Pizza, 324 Front Street, Belleville.
Weather for the Quinte region today, cloudy with sunny periods with a high near 8. Tonight we'll have periods of rain. It will be mild with a low about 3. For Wednesday you can expect rain and a high near 7. Thursday looks partially cloudy with a few flurries or showers. The high will be +1 and a low at -6. Probability of precipitation 20% today, 70% tonight, 90% Wednesday. Currently the temperature outside is +4 degrees. Well, that's it for the news, weather, and sports. Don't forget to join us tomorrow at 11:30. Until then, good afternoon for John Platts and the entire TV8 News crew. Good afternoon.